Thank you everyone for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We just wanted you guys to know that this will be recorded, so we will send it out after the webinar ends. If you guys have questions, you can write them in the chat box. We're going to try to address some of them on this webinar and some of them on the next webinar. And then lastly, Brad Simpson, who is our executive director, he did have a prior engagement. He'll be joining us at the end of the webinar to update us on Sunrise and COVID. As many of you guys know, we did have a positive COVID case a few weeks ago. So he's going to address that and give you guys an update on where we're at. I want to go ahead and introduce our two presenters. We have Dustin Tibbetts. Dustin, can you give a wave? And then Craig Simpson. Craig, if you can give a wave. So Dustin's experience spans over 2 decades in long-term residential treatment, outpatient and transition settings. He has served on the boards of Early Light Academy and the Association of Children's Residential Treatment Centers. He's a popular presenter at national conferences and universities, and he was the recipient of NATSAP's prestigious Leadership Award in 2014. Dustin holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and he is licensed in Utah. Dustin represents Potomac Programs, which is a continuum of behavioral health care for adolescents and young adults, ranging from in-home outpatient care to short-term residential, including IOP and PHP. They are in 6 major metropolitan cities throughout the country, and they will be adding more in the near future. And then Craig Simpson has spent nearly 20 years dedicated to working with children, adolescents, and their families in outpatient, day treatment, and residential settings. He has been providing multifamily DBT skills groups as well as individual DBT for 15 years. Craig currently serves as the Senior Clinical Director here at Sunrise Residential Treatment Center. And Sunrise is a leading comprehensive DBT long-term residential treatment center located in Southern Utah. We serve adolescent girls ages 13 to 18 struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidality, self-harm, trauma, and emotional dysregulation. So we're going to start with Dustin. Take it away, Dustin.
Okay, thanks, Marcy. I think you could have just said that you're my friend, and that would have been the better introduction. Because you're a good. Anyway, well, I'm going to kick this off. Craig's obviously the expert in DBT. I don't pretend to be. I see Brooke Senior, a clinical director at Potomac Programs, is waving. So feel free to pipe in, Brooke. She really kind of led the charge with her teams on our movement from in-person to virtual, which is what I want to talk about, and keeping fidelity with DBT, even though the delivery method might be a little different. So let me share my screen. Tell me if this works. Can you see my screen there? The challenge is that I can't see your faces.
Yes.
Let me see if I can fix this a little bit so I can see as many of you as possible. I won't be able to see the chat, Marcy, so if somebody says something, will you let me know? Okay. All right. I think what happened to us in the last month and a half is made me feel a lot of things, I guess, but the primary emotion that I've been feeling is gratitude. And I wanted to kind of couch my comments in that light. Danny DeVito said, for the light of gratitude to shine brightly, sometimes we have to experience the darkness of how it could be worse. You can see how he said it exactly there. I think that's really what's happened as COVID-19 has kind of, raged across the world. Here's what happened for us. On Friday the 13th, literally Friday the 13th, we went virtual in our Maryland clinic where Brooke is at. And it was a tough decision. On the 11th of March, the governor of the entire state had announced that he was closing all the schools. Prior to that time, some of you who live out there might have remembered, they were thinking maybe just counties were going to do it. But if you remember that week, Tom Hanks announced that he had corona and his wife. And then the NBA shut down. Remember that? It was a series of very weird things happened that week. And then our governor in Maryland decided he's going to close all the schools. So we decided to close as well. And we weren't really sure what we were going to do. So Brooke and her team, I don't see anybody else on here from there, but if they are, they can tell me. We went to family and individual therapy sessions. We didn't know what we could do. By the week of March 16th, we began a virtual IOP because we heard that states and payers are going to flex to cover telehealth. We still aren't sure if we'll get paid the same for insurance companies. But during the weeks of March 23rd, April 27th, there was rapid change. We found out that some PHP could be continued virtually. We found out insurance will pay the same rate. Some insurances for virtual versus in-person. We found out that states were flexing across state lines. For example, Virginia said, if you're already treating somebody that was traveling from Virginia to Maryland in person, you could treat them virtually over the telephone or over visual. Some states were saying no telephone, only visual. That's since changed a little bit depending upon where you are. And so now we're anticipating running into May, what's going to happen next. This was our timeline. I'm sure all of you can feel, you had maybe something similar or more dramatic. Let me, before I talk about a little bit about how we adapted, let's talk about what has not changed. The science of change will not change. So this study was done twice, and it was done with more than 6,000 studies of change. And so it's a meta-analysis of how people shift. I can send you the references if you'd like, but basically what they found was that people change for 4 reasons. The primary reason people change, 40% of change, is because of variables outside of the therapy session. This is things like divorce, somebody moves, someone has a child die, an act of God like an earthquake or lightning strike, things like that affect us to change faster than anything else. The second biggest proponent of change is a therapeutic relationship with a caregiver of some kind. Now, they specifically did not say therapist in this study. What they found was it was the specific relationship with a caregiver that was therapeutic. And then number 3 is hope that I can change. Some people call this the placebo or expectancy effect. What it really means is I feel like I'm capable of it. And the 4th thing is basically the technique. So those things have not changed. What's changed is, for us in Maryland, is the delivery method. So we had this massive effect of some variable outside our control, coronavirus, which meant people were getting ill, threat of illness, there are economic stressors that are yet to come, school closures, families are tight together, with a lot of stress in a small enclosed space. All of that was happening. That's a primary motivator for change. Our therapeutic relationship, we found in some cases, could be enhanced by telemental health. Some kids actually like it better. Obviously, some kids don't. Best therapists I think that we have always inspired hope that a kid could change or a family could change. They still do that. And then we had to adapt DBT to a virtual setting, okay? And the challenge there was we pride ourselves on being experiential. And DBT, as you know, if you're not careful, if you don't have a skilled presenter, it can be very didactic, very transactional in its delivery. And we work hard not to have it that way. So the other thing that won't change is the primary function of our profession. Our primary function is to heal generations. If you think about what you do, what we do, we heal people, we heal families. Maybe in the process, we ourselves are healed, and generations are affected. If we don't do our job, the suicide rate, which has been climbing for 10 years, will continue to climb and will only be exacerbated by the current state of affairs in the world. So our primary function will not change. We still offer skilled intervention. We still offer hope for change. We still offer a therapeutic, powerful caregiver relationship. We still try to enhance whatever the world throws at people, the variables outside of our control, okay? There's some research out there. Long before this all happened, there was research on telemental health. Many of you who've been around for a while know 15 years ago, we were experimenting with phone therapy. And then, recently in the last few years, 4 years or so, video's been more accessible. The evidence is really encouraging. This is just one study from Psychology Today. I've included here. We'll send it out to you if you want to see it later. But some studies found that teletherapy is as good as traditional therapy for depression. Think about that for a second. I had a kid one time that I could not get through to, and so I just sat her back to back with me with her phone and my phone, and I typed to her and she typed back, and that was the best session we ever had. Why? Because that's how she wanted to connect. Far be it from me to impose my connection strategy on another human being. And sometimes I think we've been prejudiced against telemental health. Well, this has forced a lot of us to rethink it. Telemental health laws are crucial to know, especially in our case, if we want to get paid, honestly, right? Through insurance companies, or if we want to make sure that we're following the law and being ethical in a certain state. This is an app that I was introduced to a few weeks ago that is free. It's offered by a national law firm that specializes in this. I'm sure there's others. I just wanted to give you one as an example. And you can research the state law for each type of therapy: marriage and family, social work, etc. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and sometimes it's hard for me to find those. Social workers seem to have a little easier to find the law. Psychologists seem to have it a little easier. This has all of it, which is really interesting. And it changes all the time. As I kind of wind down here, my intro, I want to just kind of stick with this theme of being grateful. I felt probably more gratitude than any other thing, even when I've been frustrated in the last 6 weeks or so. In my opinion, it's gratitude that defeats fear. There's been a lot of fear. So let's give people something to be grateful for. The way that we go about our job might have changed, but our core purpose of being as a therapist has not changed. And the way people change will not change. So what could we do differently, though, to enhance, the opportunity that the coronavirus has presented to us? Well, first, what we've learned is we've had to assess differently. We never sat around the treatment team saying, are they able to be managed from a distance really well? But now you're on screen, right? And can you manage them from a distance? Maybe the kid who can't be managed from a distance shouldn't be admitted into the clinic. You know what I'm saying? So I think I heard a story from our other clinical director, Nate, who told me that a kid fell asleep on screen. And so the therapist had to text the mother to walk into the room to wake the kid up because they were asleep on screen, right? Can they be managed from a distance if they have a parent there that can help coach? I'm sure school teachers are having the same problem. Parent contact had to increase. That first week, that week after the March 13th, it was crazy. The amount of family and individual sessions that our therapist did was amazing. It skyrocketed. There were 50 sessions that they did in a week, when on average we probably do 8 or so. It was incredible how much more time they spent. Think about the anxiety of the parents who are thinking, if my kid's going to run away out into Corona as a way to kind of punk me, and I've got to be on the phone with somebody, who can I call? Oh, I'm going to call my caregiver who's inspiring hope in me, who has great skills, has a relationship with me, right? So the therapist really kind of took the brunt of a lot more stuff, but that phone coaching was greatly appreciated by them. We had to track details, our billing department. We had to create a whole different matrix of which insurance companies are reimbursing based on the new telemental health, state of affairs, which state has flexed its rule, who's allowing people to cross state lines, who's not. That was, I was extremely grateful for people who were able to put that together. And we're happy to share that if you'd like. Retaining rhythms. I think that was really important, that we continue to have our one-on-one meetings. All of our direct reports have one-on-one meetings, that we continue to have business as usual meetings, and not let everything be dominated by Corona. We did have a few missteps. There are a few meetings that we skipped that first week because we were all in crisis, and I think we regretted doing it. But we had a town hall meeting recently and played together online, and we do that once a month, and that was kind of fun to be together. And then the flex financials. This is, the hard part of running a business, is having to know, like, when do you cut back, when do you not, how do you cut back, who do you cut back, really is what that amounts to, right? Having something clear to guide you makes, the people you report to grateful, right? Knowing what you're going to do ahead of time. I think this is something that we're still kind of playing with, trying to figure out, what does it really look like? We have lag times we get paid from insurance, so it's sometimes we wait 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer, to know what we have. And so far, we have not had to do any layoffs, and I've been grateful for that. Just in closing, this is a quote from my mother. I served in Germany for a couple of years, and I was away from her for a while. And right as I left to do this service in Germany, I found out she had ovarian cancer. And she wrote me every week as I was away. And back then we didn't have, cell phones. I'm pretty old. Back then we didn't have really good email connection. This was really just letters. And one of the letters that I got from her talked about how she was having all this chemotherapy, a new treatment there. They pour the chemotherapy in a port right into her body cavity because the cancer had spread throughout what they call the omentum, which is the fabric that holds your guts together. And they pour this directly in, and then they extract this fluid out, and it was just, it was killing everything, really, is what was happening. And she was very sick. And she said she was asked to exercise, and she was supposed to walk around, and she tried to walk around our neighborhood, which was about a half a mile, and she couldn't make it. My father would have to just have a car there and bring her back. She said, but if I practice being grateful, I can go a little further. And what she found is she could walk that half mile twice. If she just practiced being grateful, I could go a little further than I thought and maybe lighten someone else's burden along the way. And if, your mother's like my mother, people come to visit her to encourage her, and she would end up encouraging them. I think this is a good metaphor for us. If we can practice being grateful in spite of the crisis, I think we can go a little further than we think. And I think we retain our role to brighten someone else's burden, which is what we do anyway. We can do that along the way. And that's my hope. So thank you. Marcy?
Thank you so much, Dustin. We appreciate your compassion and your passion for this field, and you can definitely see it in the way that you speak. Okay, so now we are going to hear from Craig Simpson, and Craig is going to go into more about how we've had to pivot and do some virtual DBT and some tips on that.
Yes, thank you very much, Dustin, as well. That was a great way to kind of start everything. So Shannon, you had the question of managing high-risk patients, especially as we come into like COVID and having to manage them through telehealth or different things. We're going to spend more time actually talking about that in the next webinar as well. But really it's been, and at least the experience that I've had, it's been utilizing the phone coaching a great deal more, and even the video options as well. I had one girl that she's left Sunrise, has been home for a while, and she really started to struggle with, it's been amazing. I've had more phone calls from past girls just saying like, I hate my parents right now. What do I do? I can't stand this anymore. I don't want to be home. And now I'm home, and they're forcing me to do this, and they're forcing me to follow the COVID directives, and I can't go out with my friends like my friends get to go out. And that's been a big one that they've struggled with. This girl in particular, it was a lot of phone coaching, and she had tried to, we were talking about what skill to use and how to use it, and she said tip, and she tried to just do kind of halfway through, and like she's like, well, I'm laying on the cold concrete, and I was like, that is not tip, and you know that. And I had to get very specific and talk her through, all right, tip is go get the cold water, put your face in it. And so she did that, and then it was just that, okay, you did that first part of tip, now let's do exercise. So she found the treadmill, and I got her parents help too, of just like, where's your treadmill, or where's something that she can do right now that's just really intense exercise. Because she had gotten to the point where it was either go to the hospital or use this skill is where she was at in her mind at the time. And so we just went through tip piece by piece. And I made her do the exercise for 15 minutes, and then she had to call me back and we checked in. And then we did the progressive muscle relaxation, and then she called me back, and then I sent her a meditation to do. So it was a lot of that phone coaching and support that kept kind of her functioning for that time. She actually did end up later, a couple of days later, in the hospital. We kept trying to use skills and doing the coaching, but it's pulling in all those resources that you have, and we'll talk more about specifics and those dilemmas that come up, especially in the second webinar. Today I really wanted to focus, I just need to get my screen up, on like that switch over and what it's been like. And there's been tons of discussion on like the DBT listserv, and all the information has been so helpful. I just don't know how many people have accessed that or been able to use it, but it's been very helpful in being able to make that switch over. Let's see. So I just want to start with, we're moving over to this virtual, and so it has to start with, sorry, I don't know why I keep going back. Oh, anyway, it has to start with that. It's just that orientation to technology is where we all start, and we've all been like, I've found myself struggling at different times. Like, is this going to work? Has this not worked? Does it work? And so it's working through a lot of those issues initially. And so even just starting with your clients and helping them understand, okay, how this is going to work. And they're usually better at it, honestly, than we are. They have it figured out in like 10 minutes and they love it. And their schools have moved over to it. So they seem to understand it better. But helping them kind of create a space at home where they can do the therapy and where they can be involved and engaged. And so helping them find whether that's their bedroom or is there someplace else that will be private where we can do the things that we need to and talk about what you need to talk about. And then helping them kind of, with teenagers, it's interesting, and just talking about it out loud. Of the tendency is they want to stare at themselves on the screen, and that tends to get in the way sometimes. And so even just talking about trying not to just stare at yourself on the screen, but really it's an opportunity to look at everybody else, depending on the situation. And then just orienting them to the platform and how you're going to do things. Are you going to like record hand raises? Are you going to be muted, unmuted? Just really getting all of that together. And then I created a list of maybe some other agreements to add to your orientation for your patients during that orientation phase. And even just when you're starting, that we'll go over. But so even like, how do absences work now? And what is a skills group absence? So on the next slide, this is just kind of the example that I came up with, just adapting things that I found online, but just the commitments of the group will start on time, that will have the session available. They can join early so that everybody kind of agrees to get on early so that you get through all the troubleshooting issues that may come up and that you're just ready to go right as soon as group is supposed to start. And then talked about the rule, if you log in more than 15 minutes late, it will be considered an absence, but that we want you to participate and be there. And then the same thing, if they log out intentionally before skills group is over, does that count as an absence? And those are things to kind of decide and define at the start of group or when you move over. And then just that we'll provide connection and support issues to the best of our abilities. And we all have different abilities levels, but it requires them, for the group leaders, for them to take some time to really learn the software and learn what they're using so that they can be proficient as possible. And then setting up kind of the expectation, if anybody gets kicked out of group or loses group, then they have a way to catch up on what was there. And so really just you'll do it during the break or at the end of the group to kind of catch them up. Or that's even then something that the co-leader can do as part of group, is to connect with them real quick and share what's going on. Thanks. And then just an overall agreement for people to be mindful. And this is actually a great opportunity. Like Dustin was talking about being grateful. I found there's been a lot of opportunities for mindfulness to take place online, and it's been nice to be able to sometimes go to different places yourself to set up where you're going to be and be in a different room than you're going to be. We were doing our virtual consultation team, and we did our mindfulness, and we did a mindfulness where we've done it before in person, and we did it again not in person this time. And it was amazing when we talked about afterward how powerful our judgments were of that. Like in this mindfulness, we stretched, and everybody said that they'd done stretches that they wouldn't have done in front of each other, but the whole goal was to listen to your body and to do the stretch. And so it's been a cool opportunity to just point out things like the judgments being stronger, and that stops me from doing certain things in front of my consultation team even that I don't do sometimes. And then really just setting up any side chats or conversations, making sure that the people are refraining from doing those and the takeaway from group, because that can also kind of get in the way. Then really dividing up things as the roles of the leader and the co-leader. And a lot of this is just familiar to everybody. This is how the roles are broken up. It's just having to add in some new facets or pieces of that the leader in general will watch the entire group and kind of watch over what's going on and the kind of the process of everything and make sure it's flowing well. And then the co-leader is there to support if somebody's having an issue with getting on or staying on, doing their best. If somebody's turning on and off their camera, and this was a good discussion on the listserv. They were talking about teenagers getting on and then not wanting to have their camera on or not wanting to participate fully that way, and it being just an opportunity to invite and to connect around it, and having the co-leader talk to them and enjoy or encourage them to join that way was a good opportunity for that co-leader and an opportunity for connection, and then just shaping into that they have the camera on all the time. Or as Dustin was pointing out, maybe it was just the texting and that was enough for that connection and for that person at that time. And so being aware of that and being able to flex has been a huge part of things. If anything, all the stuff that's happened has required a lot of texting and embracing changes that comes, and it's coming and the co-leader being able to, it's a good and easy opportunity that the co-leader and reinforce some of the things doing during discussion or review. Almost then happened. So sorry about that. We lose everyone. Everybody else is still on here. Okay, I just can't see them. That's really weird. No, sorry about that, everybody. This is what happens, right? So then we go into the regular format of group.
Can't hear you.
You can't.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you share. Amy's going to share from her screen. Somehow the slides got messed up. So then going to the group format. Oh, there, stop sharing. So then you start following kind of the group format normally. You've done your orientation. Everybody knows we're going to use the hand raise feature, or for discussion, we're going to unmute everybody. It's really hard. It's been interesting doing these meetings and presentations and things. Everybody's so silent. I have no feedback other than just being able to stare at people on the screen. And sometimes there's some feedback there, and sometimes it can be pretty empty. But it's not the same as having people laughing or making comments, because it's so hard to do sometimes on these platforms. So we go to the group format, and we start with mindfulness. And so everybody has their different way of doing that, but usually we have the co-leader do the mindfulness, while then the leader again is going out and inviting people to come and join group. And so it's going and finding those people, texting. We do phone calls, or can do phone calls and leave messages, and just inviting them to group and knowing that we miss them. I've always been amazed with how much of a difference that makes with even my families when I call and say, hey, we missed you this week, or we're missing you, and we want you to come join. Please come join, regardless of whether it's an absence or not. I've had families stick in groups longer than they've graduated, and they still stick around in group. And it's been some cool experiences that way, just the connection that you can create through that reaching out time. And then it's been really important, and I don't know if other people have experienced this when like teaching mindfulness, because of how it's not as transactional anymore. It's been more important to kind of follow some of that format that they've talked about for a long time in DBT, of telling a personal story and making it personal, especially with everything that's going on with COVID and all the restrictions. There's lots of opportunities to share how mindfulness has helped. Keeping all the instructions for your mindfulness really simple. Reminding them about wandering, and then even being able to watch for wandering sometimes on the screen, and having your co-leader help with some of that. And then just that on-the-spot coaching as you're reviewing the mindfulness and having the discussion, of being able to reinforce with the participants in the group that the things that they've done effectively with their mindfulness during the week. And then we move to practice homework review. And we have that, so the co-leader runs mindfulness, and then the leader takes back over again and does the practice, and they do the homework review together. And this again has been a tricky one with online telehealth groups, in that at first it feels like it's taking longer than it ever took before to kind of, if you're trying to get through every participant. And so it's coming up with kind of a format and helping people work through the review. Sometimes it can go very quickly, but as we've gotten a rhythm, it's started to work very well. And I don't know if other people have found that, but then having a method, if there's any assignments that you need to collect, emails work the best, rather than trying to find other ways of doing that. And there aren't a lot of assignments that we even end up collecting, but having a way to do that, and then being able to review and use those. Diary cards, although they're turned in individual therapy, I just put it on here because there's so many different electronic diary card apps, but I haven't found one that is necessarily my favorite. I kind of default to the DBT Skills app, if anybody's familiar with that one. It has a little icon that looks like a tree and a brain. But being able to use that to kind of review diary cards, and that one's cool in that you can share it, I believe, with multiple people, and it can be sent to the group leaders and to the individual therapists. And so that's sometimes helpful to have that shared with everybody. And then you move on to the new skill in teaching, which again has created, I talked to one practice, and they'd had everybody muted during all the new skill teaching, and they decided to start unmuting everybody. And they actually found that it increased engagement, and it was okay. It didn't, you still had to kind of follow the rules of talking over each other and keeping yourself muted at times, but it helped with the feedback, and it increased their discussion. Otherwise, it turned into this really long didactic, just teaching the skill. And then coming up with creative ways. The technology actually is cool in that you can create the breakout sessions, and so you can divide people up, and they have to discuss the skill, and they can talk about different ways to use it, or even the role playing. In MultiFamily Skills, it's fun to make families kind of role play, and they get a chance to kind of do that all together if the parents are participating along with the students. And that's the other, I didn't talk about this, but if you're doing a we'll talk about it in a minute, actually, I just remembered, so sorry. But really kind of coming up with, there are videos that you can share, and it's easy to share that on the platform a lot of the time. That are just examples of skills and then discussing those, but really trying to make it as experiential and engaging as possible. And using the space that they have around them, maybe for mindfulness, going outside and doing a paying attention to the sounds around you, mindfulness, and then coming back in, or even taking, if they're on their phone, with them and doing some of that. But it really just, you have to start to get really creative in what you use and how you use it. And then again, just assigning the practice or the homework at the end of group. So it's really kind of just staying true to the format and having to flex along the way with all the new technology and the differences that we're running into. Oh, we changed the next one. So then multi-skills group. So the first thing to kind of like talk about or decide, and it's not set in stone, but you have different family members sign on separately, or do you do them together as a family? And there have been advantages to both. Like I said, when you have the family all together, my favorite has been doing the middle path skill, actually. And so we do kind of a fishbowl exercise where as groups, we come up with what are those issues that often divide the parents and the teenagers, and then picking a family. And so having a family that can do this together in their house, and they start to kind of use those steps of how do you find the middle path as a family. And so going through the validation on each side and really kind of coaching them through. It's been cool to use that as like the fishbowl almost, and they get to be on camera and they get coached through every step. Having them on single has also been really helpful, and then we can sometimes break up parents and the teens or adolescents into different kind of groups for different activities. Like that one, we like to initially break them up, and the parents come up with all the things that they feel kind of divided from their teenagers over, and the teenagers come up with theirs. And then we combine everybody back together and go over those things. And so that's the breakout features. And then parents can really help with supporting the participation of the adolescents. And it's interesting. You don't want to introduce kind of a difficult relationship there, have the parents constantly monitoring their teenager and be like, you're not paying attention, you're not watching. Then you just get into more even therapeutic behavior or therapy interfering behavior from parents, or that can become almost that for the teenager. But I love multifamily skills groups, and I was really scared making the shift of whether they would function the same way or how to make them function the same way, because they're just so powerful and can be so powerful. Even during homework review, there have been different times that you have maybe a family skill that they're working on, and doing that review during the practice review has been very helpful too, of different family members checking in on if they're just practicing validation for that week as a family, and how it's always interesting to get the teenager's perspective of how did mom do on validation, how did dad do, and getting that different feedback has been super helpful. And then just the individual skill review as well. Let's see. Then really our quicker ending early, but Brad's doing his update. Yeah. So then we want to continue this series, and so if you guys have other questions or things that you'd like to talk about, next time we were going to focus on the new dialectics that we find ourselves in group and just in the COVID environment. And so if there's any that you guys want to contribute, please send those in. But these are just resources that people can use. We have a lot of videos that our awesome parent company has helped us create that are examples of the skills. They just give a really quick introduction to the skill, talk about it, give an example, and then the end. And then we have our DBT skills cards that actually we'll send them out to everybody, right? Is what we talked about. Yeah. So that everybody can have a set of those and just see, there's just the skills written down in a really easy format to kind of access. And the goal is to one day have a real app developed, but that's kind of further down the road. So Um, yep, and then Marcy, back to you. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Sorry about the technical
Yes.
difficulties we were experiencing earlier. I think we lost a couple of the questions, but Amy found them. So we will address them. We'll also send out the slides to everybody on here. And we really want this to be an interactive approach. So if you guys have questions or comments or things that are working for you, best practices, things like that, we would love to hear them. And then lastly, we would like Brad to be able to give an update on where Sunrise is at with COVID. So Brad, we'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody and appreciate what was shared thus far. I'm going to see if I can get my video to highlight on me there. There we go. Anyways, I appreciate Dustin and Craig taking the time they did to work on this. I think we got a lot of great information about telehealth, as well as I appreciate Craig. I think there was a question that came in that talked about what are some of the dialectical dilemmas we're facing right now, and we'll be talking about that in our next webinar. And I'll give you one that we've had just with COVID-19. So at Sunrise, we continue to have admits. We're a residential treatment center for adolescent girls, and we've had admits from around the country. And anyways, we had one student, as everything was kind of coming down and states were starting to stay home and make some restrictions that way. It was very early in the beginning. We had a group of students that actually went home on home visits. And so we had students coming back before it really canceled travel or the world was starting to do that. We had a student come back with some flu-like symptoms. And so while she was back with flu-like symptoms, we did our regular routine. We had her on sick bed. We took her to the doctor. We checked all those things out. She didn't have your classic signs and symptoms of COVID-19. However, after a couple of days, we had gotten word from the family that had lived in New York. New York at the time wasn't known as a hot spot, but it was becoming known as one. And she was kind of at the very beginning and early stages there in New York with her family on a visit. And so during that time, we actually gotten word from the family that she may have been exposed on her visit. So the good news is at Sunrise, we had been planning and preparing using drills and other things, preparing with policy and procedures in terms of knowing how do we deal with COVID-19 here at Sunrise while continuing to deliver and offer the services we do to our families around the country and around the world. And so what we were able to do is move to quarantine, and actually with her, we moved her to isolation. So she had her own room, her own bathroom, her own bedroom, her own TV, her own computer, and then we assigned certain staff to go and work with her, and she was kept in quarantine during that time. And then we tested her, and the test did come back positive. So the positive thing with all that, she was fairly asymptomatic. She developed a slight fever and had a cough, and all of that was symptom-free pretty quickly. She's doing really well today. She's recovered quickly. In the midst of all of that, we were able to put our protocols in place. And we also, because of that, in that process, what it really required was that we, if nothing more, that we used our dialectical dilemmas and our DBT skills, right? In terms of, being able to talk through with families what that meant that we had a positive case on campus, how we were working with it, and some of the dilemmas we were facing. It was interesting as I talked with one parent, we had several students that we were watching very closely for any signs or symptoms. We really wanted to be clear that there wasn't an exposure or spread that was occurring. We had several staff that were tested. The good news, everybody came back negative, so we really were able to isolate it to that one student. But I had a dad, as I called him with the results of the tests for his daughter, and let him know that she came back negative. He said, on the one hand, and this is the dialectic, right? And I think he summed this up well with DBT and using that principles we've been working on. He just said, on the one hand, I'm thrilled she's negative. On the other hand, I'm actually disappointed because I know the exposure still has to happen. And you think about it with this post we are going to live in a post-COVID-19 world, right? We at Sunrise are dealing with that. Not only how do we keep our plan and procedures in place to keep our students and our staff protected and safe, but how do we deal with COVID-19? But we as really as a nation and as a world are facing that as well, in terms of what's the new normal going to look like. And I can't help but think how grateful I've been to have the skills that I've learned in DBT really to help me. I've found myself using a lot of radical acceptance around the daily changes that are occurring. I don't know about you, but some of my favorite restaurants I don't get to go sit in anymore. And my wife and I love to go on dates and be in restaurants together. I've done a lot of radical acceptance that has changed. However, on the other hand, there have been a lot of new opportunities. I've created a much more integrated lifestyle into work and the things that I'm doing, in terms of my kids are home all the time now, and we're together and we go on walks together and we're outside more and we're doing things that way. So we'll talk more about some of those dilemmas that we're facing, not only for ourselves, but our clients are dealing with next time, as well as I loved what Craig had brought up about phone coaching. If you remember in the manual, the DBT manual, the cognitive behavioral therapy, Charlie Swenson called it the Bible for DBT, that initial book that came from Marsha Linehan. The thing that it really emphasizes in phone coaching is attending to the relationship, especially early on in treatment. And it's been interesting for me, and I think Craig gave a really good example of, and Dustin also, of how at some level it's allowed us the opportunity to better attend to relationships despite the distance we may have, whether through phone coaching or through our virtual means that we're doing. So I've appreciated all of those things that have been coming. Our upcoming webinars will go through again. We want you to be aware of those links and resources. We hope to those things will be of value to you in teaching your clients. I know we use them with our clients, those videos, as well as I use them myself as I continue to learn skills and understand those. So just want to tell everybody thank you for joining us, and we appreciate you making the time. I had one gentleman, one colleague from Australia reach out, and he asked that we record this because he was not going to attend live at 1 a.m. And so we appreciate the sacrifice of time you made, and wanted to be real clear we kept it to an hour. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I am radically accepting that I tested my computer video before this and it worked, and it didn't when we started this. So again, I jumped on my phone. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulties we had during the middle of it, but there's a lot of good comments on here and a lot of good questions. So we will look at addressing those in the next webinar. There's many of you that I see on here that we've met with in person, and we really appreciate those relationships. We know that your guys' time is extremely valuable, so we appreciate you hopping on and giving us an hour of your time, and we wish you guys luck, and we'll see you next week.